If I were you, I wouldn't even dare show up at the wedding looking like that. You're way past the age. And now, without a single hair on your head, you're going to ruin all the photos." That was what Vanessa said in front of everyone, early in the morning, while I was still trying to process why I had woken up completely bald just hours before my own son's wedding. The catering driver, who was unloading crates of champagne, stopped dead in his tracks with a tray suspended in midair. The neighbor from the house next door, who was sweeping her driveway, stood there staring without even trying to hide her curiosity. The wind kicked up a little dust, forcing me to blink hard to keep my composure. Vanessa was leaning against the doorframe with that crooked, venom-filled smirk she wore whenever she wanted to make me feel small. She didn't even dignify me by lifting her head from her smartphone while she spoke. I stood there, frozen, clutching my embroidered handkerchief between my fingers. My body locked up for an instant, paralyzed, but I didn't shed a single tear. I only felt an immense void taking over my chest, a dizzying sensation as if someone had pulled the floor out from under me. You know when you realize, all of a sudden, that the person you treated like your own flesh and blood never actually saw you as family? It was right there, on that sidewalk, with the sun beating down on my face and my bald scalp burning from how fresh it was. The down payment for that house had been paid with the money from selling my mother's land back in the country, and Jason's college tuition. I was the one who sustained it down to the last penny, working without rest. But 3 days after that humiliation, when he found out what I was capable of, his face lost all its color. He never expected that I would have the strength to flip the script like that. And in that moment, everything changed forever. I have always been a working woman. From a young age, I learned to make do with the little I had at hand. My mother used to say that when life gets tight, you straighten your back, take a deep breath, and keep going without looking back. And that was how I lived my entire life, especially after becoming a widow so young. Frank, my husband, left us way too soon. An absurd accident at work, a silly fall, a hard blow to the head. It was 3 days of anguish in the hospital, and then the doctor called me into the hallway with that compassionate look one never manages to forget. I went back home holding Jason by the hand. He was 7 years old and didn't understand why his dad wasn't coming back with us. From that point on, my life became pure survival. In the mornings, cleaning 2 houses. In the afternoons, doing alterations and sewing for the whole neighborhood. At night, I took care of Mrs. Higgins, an elderly lady who needed company so she wouldn't feel alone. I worked up to 14 hours a day for years. I slept little, very little, just the bare minimum to stay on my feet. Everything I did was for Jason. Because even though I was small and humble, I had one giant certainty. My son was not going to get lost. He was not going to go hungry. He was not going to be swallowed up by the hard life I knew so well. When he turned 15, I asked for more work. I started accepting sewing jobs even during the weekends. My hands ached, my shoulder would lock up from fatigue, but I breathed deep and kept going. At school, they praised his performance. They said he was intelligent, dedicated. I listened to those words, and it felt like someone was giving me back the breath I was missing. The first great sacrifice came when he got accepted into college. I knew the tuition was expensive, but I also knew I wasn't going to let that opportunity slip through his fingers. I sold the land that had belonged to my mother. It was the only real inheritance I owned, the place where I grew up, where she grew mint and chamomile in the back garden. I signed the sale papers with a trembling hand, but with a steady and determined heart. The money was enough to pay the enrollment, a few months of tuition, and help him support himself at the start. The second sacrifice came 2 years later. I started sleeping even less. I stopped sewing simple clothes and switched to prom dresses, suits, heavier and more complicated things. They paid better, it's true, but they demanded much more from my eyes and my body. My back stayed knotted up for months on end. I took painkillers in secret from Jason because I didn't want to see even a shadow of worry on his face. He needed to study, not take care of me. And the third sacrifice, nobody ever knew about that one. For almost a year, with the tuition late, the college threatened to cancel his enrollment and kick him out. I took out a loan in my name, with sky-high interest rates, just so he wouldn't be penalized or lose the semester. I remember the bank teller handing me the contract and asking, "Are you sure, ma'am?" And I was. My son was not going to fall into the world without tools just because I had little money. When he finished his degree, I felt that the diploma was a little bit mine too. I was aged, exhausted, but there was a peace inside me that I had never felt before. He got a job quickly, dressed well, spoke beautifully. He started bringing colleagues home, presenting projects, talking about growth in the company. And it was in this phase of rising up that he met Vanessa. The first time she entered my house, I noticed immediately how she scanned everything with her gaze. The simple pictures, the old furniture, the keepsakes I kept with affection from my husband. She said nothing, but her way of looking said it all. A raised eyebrow, a little smirk at the corner of her mouth. I wasn't used to people who judge before knowing. Even so, I was polite and hospitable. I made coffee, put a homemade cake on the table, tried to make conversation. She answered in monosyllables, more attentive to her phone than to my presence. Over time, they got serious. She was beautiful, always put together, had a different kind of confidence, something imposing. She said she worked at a high-end store, that she had plans to grow. Jason seemed enchanted, mesmerized. And I, as always, stayed on the sidelines rooting for everything to work out. I was never a mother to get in the way of my son's relationships. On the contrary, I tried to add to them. The first subtle humiliation happened on a Sunday. Jason had agreed to come over for lunch with me. I prepared everything early, a tender pot roast cooked slowly, fluffy homemade mashed potatoes, and green beans just the way he liked them. I set the table with my best china, the set I received at my wedding and guarded like gold. He arrived with Vanessa, and before even sitting down, she looked at the table and blurted out, "Oh, is this what we're eating today?" Jason let out a short, nervous laugh, as if the comment was normal. I felt a tightness in my chest, but I pretended I hadn't heard. I offered her the best seat, pulled out her chair. She didn't even say thank you. She started scrolling through her phone, took a picture of the food, and sent it to someone, without hiding her face of disdain. Halfway through lunch, she commented casually, "At my house, we don't eat food this heavy, this rich in carbs, but hey, once won't kill anyone." Was that for me? Of course it was. Her look made it crystal clear. But I took a deep breath. I swallowed hard. I continued serving as if everything was perfectly normal. Jason said nothing, neither to defend me nor to cut off her acidic comment. That day, when they left, I cleared the plates slowly, trying to understand what had happened. I washed everything calmly, looking at my own reflection in the kitchen window. The sensation was strange, as if a little piece of my home had been invaded and touched without permission. I didn't know it yet, but that would be just the first of many small jabs that would come later. Jabs that, added up, would lead me to a place I never imagined I'd reach. That of being treated like a burden, like a nuisance, as if my history, my sacrifices, and my entire life were worth absolutely nothing. And so it was, in this mix of blind love for my son and swallowed silences, that everything began to unravel, without me perceiving the gravity of what was to come. After that Sunday, things didn't get worse all at once. They came little by little, like someone tightening a screw slowly, turn by turn, until it hurts. First, it was loose comments, then looks, then small attitudes that made me feel I was no longer welcome in their world. And, when I realized it, I was already living shrugging my shoulders to not bother anyone, breathing quietly to not respond, pretending I didn't see what was right in front of my face. The first clearer humiliation happened when they moved into the house I helped buy with my savings. Jason had asked me to stay with them for a few weeks, until I organized my own housing plans. He said it would be good, that I would be closer, that the house had space. I accepted, naively. I went with my old notebook, my cloth tote bag, and a few clothes, just the essentials. On the second day, Vanessa appeared at the door of the guest room where I was staying. She looked around, crossed her arms, and said, "Martha, just to organize things, it's not going to work if you keep your stuff in the bathroom, okay? The smell of your lotion is too strong, and it gives me a migraine." It was a lie. I barely used a neutral lotion, but I swallowed it and took my things out without a word. The next day, she came again. "Oh, and please, no leaving pots in the sink. Here in this house, we don't like clutter." The pot was theirs. I hadn't even cooked that day. On the third day, she stuck a paper on the fridge with house rules. Simple things, but written in a way that hurt. Don't leave dirty dishes. Don't use the washing machine without asking. Clean up what you mess up, as if I were a stranger who needed basic instructions on how to live with people. Jason saw the paper, laughed and said, "Oh, babe, what an exaggeration." But he didn't take it down. I breathed deep and kept going. I thought it was just a matter of adaptation, that soon everything would fall into place. But it didn't. One day I came in from outside and found a trash bag next to the door. It was my handmade quilt, the one I crocheted little by little, square by square, during the cold months when Jason was in college. I took the quilt in my hands, confused. Vanessa appeared in the living room and said, "Oh, I put that out there to wash. It had a sort of old smell, like a closet." She said it smiling with total naturalness. The quilt was clean. I felt my face burning, but I didn't answer. I folded it with care, put it over my arm, and went to my room. There I sat on the bed and stayed paralyzed for a few minutes, clutching the fabric against my chest. It could be just a blanket to anyone, but for me, it was a piece of life, of memory. And someone had decided that thing was useless, that it was trash. The second humiliation was worse. It happened at a family gathering, at Jason's sister's house. I went along, thinking it would be a light day. When we arrived, Vanessa went straight to the kitchen. I heard her talking to my sister-in-law, but without imagining the subject was me, until I heard the full sentence. She came too. I told Jason she was going to bring the mood down, but he insists. The sister-in-law let out a complicit little giggle. Vanessa completed, "It's just that she doesn't know how to dress for occasions like this. She always looks like she just ran out of a thrift store." I was behind the door. I stood motionless. My hands went cold. I thought about leaving, running away, but Jason appeared, hugged his sister, and didn't even notice my decomposed expression. During lunch, Vanessa ignored me royally. She didn't ask if I wanted a drink, didn't answer when I tried to make conversation. I existed there only as a shadow. On the ride back home, Jason was animated, telling stories. I just stared out the window. He noticed nothing, or he preferred not to see. The third humiliation involved the grandkids. At that time, the first one was still small. One day, I offered to watch him while they went out to dinner. I've always liked children, and Jason grew up in my arms. Vanessa looked at me quickly, evaluating me, and said, "Better not, Martha. You have trouble getting up fast, right? Imagine if something happens and you don't react." As if I were incapable. As if I hadn't raised a man all by myself, carried heavy bags, pushed strollers, walked across the city my whole life. Jason was present. He didn't defend me, didn't explain anything. He just stayed quiet. I felt my heart sink. It wasn't just distancing, it was distrust. It was as if I had aged overnight and lost any value as a human being. From that point on, I started paying attention, making mental notes, keeping messages, receipts, small proofs that I wasn't inventing anything in my head. It was instinct, an instinct that is born when pain stops being a surprise and becomes a warning of danger. I didn't want to use any of that. I didn't want conflict with my son. But, for the first time, I understood that if I didn't protect myself, they were going to run me over without looking back. The situation worsened when Vanessa organized their son's birthday party. I helped set up the tables, blew up balloons until I was dizzy, cut the cake. In the middle of the party, she came up to me, took my arm lightly and said, "Martha, stay more towards the back, okay? In the family photo, it's not necessary for you to appear so much." That went through me like a knife. I released my arm slowly. She walked away without waiting for an answer. When I looked, she had already gathered the family in front of the backdrop and taken the photos, without me. I stayed by the gate, clutching my old notebook, feeling a mix of shame and disbelief, and nobody there seemed to find it strange. It was that night that I made the silent decision to never again enter unprepared into any situation involving the two of them. I still didn't know the size of the storm that was coming, but I knew I was going to need to be alert. I started keeping old receipts, notes, conversations, commitments I had fulfilled. Not to use them against my son. I would never wish for that. but because I already understood there was someone near him who had no moral limits. And when someone like that gains space inside one's life, one needs at least to have something to hold on to when the fall comes. I just didn't imagine the fall would be so hard, so dirty, and so fast, and that when it arrived, I would be totally alone. The blows started as things that truly hurt usually do, with care, with a rehearsed gentleness, with a tone of voice that doesn't match the real intention. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Jason called me to sit at the kitchen table. Vanessa was by his side, phone in hand, but this time without that usual impatient air. She put the device face down, crossed her hands on the table, and said, "Martha, we really need to talk to you. It's important." In that instant, my stomach flip-flopped. A mother's intuition doesn't fail. Jason took a deep breath, adjusted his chair, and started. "Mom, I have a huge opportunity at work, a promotion. But to get it, I need to come in with an investment along with the team." I stayed quiet, waiting. He continued, "It's small, Mom. It's just to complete my part. We thought that, maybe, you could help." The word help came out soft, almost sweet. But Vanessa completed quickly. "It's a simple thing, Martha. You sign for the loan and we pay everything punctually. In 2 months, it's resolved." They had already rehearsed every phrase. That became clear in the way one looked at the other before speaking. I felt my back stiffen. Every decision involving money leaves marks. I had already sold land, taken out loans for college, delayed my bills to keep my son studying. I helped because it was for him. But there, seeing the two of them staring at me as if they already knew I would say yes, my heart warned, something is wrong here. Even so, Jason was my son. And a son, to a mother, never stops being a boy. I said, "How much are we talking about?" When the figure came out of his mouth, my chest actually heated up. It was high, very high, and it didn't match the simple opportunity Vanessa had described. I looked at both of them, waiting for more explanations. The silence answered in their place. "Son, that is a lot of money. Are you sure you need a loan in my name?" Vanessa didn't wait. "Martha, nobody is going to run any risk. It's just a signature. You won't pay a dime. You just help release the credit. We take care of the rest." I perceived the tone, that superficial politeness on top and the impatience underneath. The same tone she used when she wanted me to step away from a conversation. Jason took my hand. "Mom, trust me." It was then that I understood the worst part. He believed her more than he believed in me. We went to the bank the next day. On the way, I observed them. Vanessa, animated, talking fast. Jason, anxious. Me, silent. It wasn't that I didn't want to help. I have always helped. The problem was the sensation of doing something that was going to cost me a very high price later. At the bank, while I was signing the contract, I noticed that no one read anything. Only me. It was high interest, a long term, huge installments, the type of loan that wasn't for someone who pays in 2 months. When the teller asked, "Are you sure, ma'am?" I swallowed hard and said, "I am." But inside, the answer was different. When we left, Vanessa gave me a little pat on the shoulder. "Relax, Martha. We'll resolve this fast." I only answered, "I hope so." I kept all the copies of the contract, every receipt, every tracking number. I left the bank clutching that envelope like someone holding proof that their heart had warned them. But nobody wanted to listen. The first 2 months passed. No news of payment, no receipt, nothing. When I asked Jason, he said, "Mom, chill. It's all underway. The system just got a little delayed." Vanessa completed, "It's normal. The bank takes time to update." Lie. I knew it was a lie. When I called the bank discreetly, they told me no installment had been paid. My chest tightened. A mix of fear and contained rage rose slowly up my throat, burning. On the 3rd collection notice, more insistent, I called Jason to talk alone. He averted his eyes, played with his phone, sighed. "Mom, we had some priorities. The money wasn't enough, but next month we'll pay everything without fail." I went to the driveway. There was a new car parked there, brand new. Smell of new car in the air. When I touched the car door, Vanessa appeared behind me and said, "Beautiful, isn't it? It was a unique opportunity. We couldn't let it pass. I turned slowly. I looked into her eyes. She held the gaze with that little smile I knew well. A smile that said, "So what? What are you going to do?" In that instant, I felt the rope had snapped. It wasn't a loan. It wasn't help. It was a scam, planned, rehearsed. And Jason, my son, was in the middle of it all. I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just felt my body turn to ice. A mother's intuition had been right from the start. The next day, I received another collection call. I called Jason. He answered, impatient. "Mom, I already told you I'm going to resolve it." And he hung up. I started to tremble. Not for the debt, but for the certainty that I was alone. Alone against two people who used my love as a tool for manipulation. That night, I sat on the bed and started separating the papers. Contract, receipts, dates, conversations. It wasn't revenge. It was self-protection. Because I knew that, right there around the corner, a bigger fall was coming. And the public blow, the blow that would rip the floor away once and for all, was still to happen. The humiliation that truly knocks you down doesn't arrive slowly. It arrives whole, without mercy, without warning, as if it were waiting for the exact moment to open the door and enter to destroy. Mine came on a Saturday morning, in the supermarket parking lot, when I least expected it. I just wanted to buy a few basic things, nothing special. I had my cloth bag, as always, and I was leaving the checkout when I heard my name shouted in a way that didn't sound like a call. It sounded like an accusation. "Martha!" I turned. Jason was coming fast, with Vanessa right behind. His face was red, irritated. She, with arms crossed, already had that sideways smile I had learned to fear. I stood there frozen between the shopping carts, clutching my bag, feeling the people nearby slow down to listen to the gossip. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked, way too loud. Loud enough for 3 people to turn their faces and stare. I didn't understand. "Did you go to the bank?" he continued. "To ask about the loan? You want to embarrass me?" Vanessa took a step forward. "Is that it, Martha? Does the lady want to play the victim now?" I felt my heart racing, but I stayed firm. I breathed and said, "I just wanted to know about the payment, Jason. They are calling me." He raised his hand like someone cutting the conversation off sharp. "They are calling because you don't trust me, because you love making a scene over everything." People started looking more openly. A lady stopped with her cart. A guy from the butcher shop stood in the doorway, wiping his hands on his apron. I felt the scene forming around me, as if I were in the center of a circle closing in to suffocate me. "Jason, I didn't do anything wrong. I just asked." He let out a short laugh, full of mockery. A laugh I had never heard come from him. "Don't you get tired of meddling in my life? It's always been like this, always controlling everything." The blow came there, direct, without breaks. I remained motionless, my son accusing me as if I were his enemy. My son, whom I carried in my arms, whom I supported, whom I put through college by selling the only valuable thing I had. My son, saying for everyone to hear that I was a burden. Vanessa, by his side, completed the stab. If the lady is so worried, why doesn't she pay it all off once and for all and leave us in peace? I felt my face burn. The bag weighed on my arm as if it were lead. The silence around became even larger, as if everyone was waiting for the coup de grace. And the blow arrived. "If you don't want to trust me, then disappear from my life. Disappear. I don't need you for anything." The phrase hit so hard I lost my breath. Disappear from my life, from my own son, in front of strangers, as if I were nothing. I saw the lady standing next to us bring her hand to her chest, scandalized. The butcher shop guy shook his head slowly. A child pulled his mother's shirt, asking something in a low voice. But nobody said anything. My body failed for a second. My legs turned to jelly. Even so, I straightened my posture. I gripped the handle of the bag with force. I looked at Jason without blinking. I needed to see with clarity the face of my son saying that. I needed to save that image, to never again doubt who was really by my side, and who never was. I didn't answer. I had no answer. Any word of mine was going to be used against me. Any sentence would become a motive for more attacks. So I just turned my back on him. I walked slowly to the sidewalk, hearing Vanessa say behind me, "Finally." That was the only thing missing. I didn't look back. Not when the sun hit me hard in the eyes, not when my hands started to tremble holding the bag, not when I felt the world shrink around me. I passed the parking lot gate, and when I took the first step on the street, my body collapsed on the inside. But I didn't let it show. I continued walking to the bus stop. I sat down. I rested the bag on my lap. I breathed deep 3 times. 2 days I stayed down. 2 days without being able to eat, without being able to get up, without understanding how that had happened so fast. But on the 3rd day, I got up. And it was on that 3rd day that I found something that would change everything. The 2 days after the humiliation in the parking lot were a blur. I don't remember well how I woke up, how night fell, what I ate, if I ate. I only remember the sensation of a slab on my chest, as if a giant hand were squeezing me from the inside and wouldn't let go. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jason's face ordering me to disappear from his life. And Vanessa's voice, dry, firm, repeating that as if she were merely taking out the trash. That was the only thing missing. I tried to get out of bed, but my body wouldn't respond. I felt a mix of shame, pain, and disbelief. The world I had built with so much effort seemed to have crumbled in a single blow. I looked at my hands, the same hands that had worked for so many years, that had sewed, cleaned, held my sick son, and I thought, how did I get here? On the 2nd day, when I opened my eyes and saw my quiet room, I understood that nobody was coming. No phone call, no visit, no message. Jason, whom I raised with so much sacrifice, had left me there, disappeared inside my own pain, as if I were clutter he had finally managed to throw away. It was there that something inside me started to change. It wasn't strength, it was survival instinct, a simple instinct. Either I get up or I sink once and for all, and sinking wasn't an option. On the 3rd day, I sat on the edge of the bed. My body seemed heavier than the sadness itself, but I sat. I inhaled slowly, let the air enter entirely. Then I stood up. Every step seemed more of a mental effort than a physical one. I went to the kitchen, made weak coffee, sat at the table, and stared at the cup. I couldn't drink. But the simple fact of being there was already different from the previous 2 days. It was then that, on an impulse I can't even explain, I opened the drawer where I kept my old documents. It was as if something was calling me. I opened it slowly. Inside, there were bills paid years ago, health records, Jason's college receipts, an envelope with the papers from the sale of my mother's land. I touched those papers like someone finding a forgotten piece of their own life. I sat on the living room floor. I spread everything around me. Papers, receipts, contracts, photos, printed conversations I had saved without knowing why. And there, surrounded by everything I had done for my family, something lit up. I remembered the loan, the delays, the lies, the new car, Vanessa's mocking laugh, the way Jason defended her without thinking twice, the collections falling on my back while they lived comfortably. And I remembered the public humiliation. That sentence, said in the middle of the parking lot, hadn't been just emotional violence. It had been a warning. They weren't going to stop. They had no limits. There, sitting on the floor, I understood that if I didn't protect myself, that thing was going to destroy the little I had left. The pain turned into a kind of clarity, a sharp clarity that cuts. I started separating by categories. All the bank loan receipts, the chat conversations where Vanessa said it would be a quick thing, the dates of the collection calls, old receipts of my sacrifices for college, the contract for the sale of the land back home, messages that showed her contempt for me. Every paper I found became a piece of a truth much larger than what I had perceived while I was just trying to keep the peace. And that truth was simple. They were using me because they knew I would never deny help to Jason. Using me because they knew I was terrified of losing him. Using me because I was alone. The sensation was bitter, like bile, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't cry. Instead, I organized. I made piles. I stapled. I noted dates in a notebook. I recalled facts I had tried to ignore. I was assembling something without realizing it. A dossier. A whole box with the story of my life and of the injustice they had committed against me. When I finished, I put everything inside a cardboard box. I closed it with care. I ran my hand over the lid. That wasn't revenge. It wasn't retaliation. It was defense. It was dignity. It was the first time I was doing something for me and not for others. At nightfall, I sat on the sofa with the box by my side and felt, for the first time in days, the air entering lighter in my chest. I knew it still hurt. I knew it would keep hurting. But I also knew that the next day, I wouldn't be alone anymore. The next day, I would have an ally. The next day, I woke up earlier than I imagined. My body still ached, as if I had taken a beating that left no marks on the outside, only on the inside. But I got up. I made coffee. I put on simple clothes, fixed my short hair as best I could, and took the box of evidence. It seemed heavier than the day before, not by the weight itself, but by what it meant to carry it. I needed someone who understood that thing better than I did. Someone who could look at those papers and confirm what my heart already knew. It wasn't exaggeration, it wasn't drama, it wasn't my invention. It was injustice, and a big injustice. It was then that I remembered Mr. Henderson. He had been the lawyer for a neighbor of my mother's many years ago. A calm, direct man who always treated me with respect when we crossed paths on the street. I didn't know if he was still practicing, but I needed to try. I picked up the phone and dialed. When I heard his voice saying, "Hello?" something inside me undid the knot I carried in my chest. "Mr. Henderson, this is Martha. Would you have a moment to talk to me today?" He heard my tone and didn't ask useless questions. He just answered, "Come at 2. My office is still in the same place." I arrived a few minutes early. The building was simple, the office small but tidy. He welcomed me with the same tranquil look as always, offered me water, and waited for me to sit. The box was on my lap, and when I put it on the desk, his look changed. Not surprise, full attention. "Something grave is happening, isn't it?" he asked. I took a deep breath, and it was there that I told everything. From the first humiliations, passing through the loan, to the scene in the parking lot. He didn't interrupt. He just listened, with his hands clasped on the desk, body leaning slightly forward, like someone collecting every word without letting any fall to the ground. When I finished, he stayed silent for a few seconds. Then he pulled the box toward him. "May I see?" I nodded. He started with the bank contracts, then the printed messages, the old receipts, the copy of my mother's land sale. He read slowly, went back, marked something mentally. Sometimes he furrowed his brow. Sometimes he took a deep breath. When he picked up the receipt of the first missed payment, he shook his head. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Martha, you have everything here. Everything." I felt the tears rising, but controlled. They weren't tears of pain. They were of relief. Relief to know someone believed me without effort. Someone who didn't treat me like a burden. "They deceived you from the start," he said firmly. "They planned to use you. The loan in your name, the lie about the promotion, the purchase of the car. All of this forms a clear pattern." I stayed quiet, absorbing every word. It was hard to hear, but it was the truth. "And there is more," he continued. "The way they treated you in public, the humiliations, the messages, all of this speaks of an attempt to make you emotionally fragile. It's not just financial, it's psychological." I felt a mix of pain and revolt. "Mr. Henderson, I don't want to destroy my son. I just want my dignity back." He nodded slowly. "I understand. And we are not going after revenge. We are going after justice." Then he stood up, took an empty folder, and started separating the documents in chronological order. First step, officially recognize your responsibility in the loan and record that you never received the promised payments. Second, notify the bank of possible emotional fraud. Third, send a formal notice to Jason with a deadline to respond. Fourth, prepare a lawsuit to recover what is yours. I listened to everything with attention, but a question throbbed in my head. And Jason? Is he going to suffer with this? The lawyer took a deep breath. "He is already suffering, Martha. It's just that he doesn't realize yet where the blow is coming from." The words went through me, not with brutality, but with truth. He continued, Vanessa, that young woman, I'll be frank, she is articulate, manipulative. That type of behavior doesn't appear suddenly. She destroys silently, and when the person realizes, they are already at the bottom. I felt my stomach turn. That was it. That was exactly it. Do you want to go all the way? He asked, looking into my eyes. I took 3 seconds to answer. Not to think, to feel the weight of the decision. I do, I said firmly. But I want to do it right, without screaming, without lowering myself, just with the truth. Mr. Henderson gave a slight smile. Then we will do it with elegance. We spent more than 2 hours organizing everything. He noted dates, cross-referenced information, marked key documents. He explained what would happen step by step. At no moment did he treat me like someone fragile or ignorant. On the contrary, he spoke as if I were the protagonist of my own defense. And I was. When we finished, he closed the folder with care and said, "Now, the next stage is the meeting. We need to see their reaction before proceeding legally." I felt my heart accelerate. Meeting? Yes, he answered. A formal conversation, the 3 of you. You, Jason, and Vanessa. I will be present. We will expose the facts. We will see how far they keep up the mask. My body froze, but at the same time I felt a strength I didn't know being born in my chest. "And when will that be?" I asked. He opened his agenda. "Next week, but before, you need to rest. Prepare yourself, because when that day comes, Martha, the truth is going to fall on them like a stone." I took a deep breath. I looked at the closed folder, the empty box, my hands. 1 week. 1 week to face who destroyed me. 1 week to put everything on the table. 1 week until my son saw, perhaps for the first time, who was really by his side and who was using him. I left the office different, less hunched, less weak. The world still hurt, but the pain came mixed with something new. Direction. The day arrived, and on that day, I entered. The week that preceded the confrontation wasn't an ordinary week. There was no crying, no lamenting, no despair. There was silence. A silence I had never experienced before. A silence that didn't hurt. It organized. I woke up, tidied the house, ate something simple, and then sat at the table with the folder Mr. Henderson had assembled. I read every paper, every date, every printed conversation. Not to memorize anything, but to remember the path that brought me there. It was as if I were reviewing my own life, only this time without closing my eyes to what hurt me. I faced it all, line by line, proof by proof. The lawyer called me daily. "Ms. Martha, I got the preventative freeze on the assets. The judge authorized it. The car, the house, his accounts, everything frozen. When will he know?" I asked in one of those calls, holding the phone with both hands. "When he tries to sell something, or when we send the notice. And when will that be?" "Next week. But before, we are going to do that meeting. Give them the last chance. Do you still want to?" I didn't hesitate. "I do." I wanted to look into Jason's eyes before any paper arrived in his hands. I wanted to see Vanessa's face when she discovered I wasn't the woman she pushed from one side to the other anymore. I wanted them to feel, even if just for a second, the weight of what they did to me. I spent the days rehearsing what I was going to say. I repeated short phrases, direct, without shaking. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw another woman. Older, yes. More tired, sure, but firm, with a straight spine, with the dignity they tried to rip from me. At night, I walked inside the house, testing the tone of my words. "I know what you did. I have everything documented. You won't use me ever again." I said this in a low voice, feeling my face change, my posture change. I didn't want to humiliate anyone. I didn't want to pay back in the same coin. I just wanted to recover what was mine, my peace, my respect, my history. On the last day before the meeting, I arranged the folder one more time. I organized the evidence by the order Mr. Henderson recommended. I put every paper inside a plastic sheet, separated, clean, clear. When I closed the zipper, I ran my hand over it and took a deep breath. I didn't feel fear. I felt a different kind of strength, a silent strength which didn't need screams. I chose my clothes with care. A simple blouse, dark, without patterns. Comfortable pants, nothing flashy. I didn't need to impress anyone. The strength was in what I brought with me, and in what I would no longer let them take from me. On the appointed morning, I woke up before the alarm. The sky was still half pale blue, that tone that precedes the sun. I took a long shower. The water fell on my shoulder and seemed to wash away the rest of the pain I still carried. I fixed my hair the best way possible. I put a discreet cream on my face, not to look younger, to look present. I took the folder. It was heavy, but now in a different way. It was the weight of the truth. Before leaving, I sat on the edge of the bed for a few seconds. I remembered Jason as a little boy, sleeping with his head on my lap. I remembered the first backpack I bought him. I remembered the diploma I held with pride when he graduated. And for an instant, I almost gave up. But it was only an instant. I got up. I walked to the living room with slow, calculated steps. I opened the door. The morning air hit my face, cold, firm. I got into the car. Mr. Henderson was at the wheel. "Ready?" he asked. I looked forward. There was no turning back. There was no more room for fear. "Ready." The car moved in silence. The city passed by the window as if it had no idea what was about to happen. My heart beat fast, but it wasn't panic. It was awareness. When we arrived, the lawyer put his hand on my shoulder. "Martha, today you lose nothing. You only win." I nodded slowly. I got out of the car. I clutched the folder against my chest. I took 3 steps toward the door, and I entered. The room where everything would happen was simple, neutral, with a rectangular table and 4 chairs. It had nothing that drew attention, but the air seemed heavy, dense, as if the truth were waiting behind the door. I entered first, clutching the folder against my chest. Mr. Henderson came right behind, calm, professional, with an expression that said nothing that happened there would knock me down. I sat on the left side of the table. I put the folder in front of me, but still closed. The lawyer arranged some papers of his, positioned his pen, and stayed silent. It was a silence of preparation. 5 minutes later, the door opened. Jason entered first, Vanessa behind, chin up, as if she were going to a meeting where she would dictate the rules. They didn't look at me immediately. They just pulled out the chairs and sat. Jason seemed irritated. Vanessa seemed ready to attack. Mr. Henderson was the first to speak. "Thank you for coming. This conversation is important." Jason crossed his arms. "I hope it's quick. We have commitments." I just observed. I didn't answer. I didn't react. Vanessa smiled sideways, provoking as she always did. The lawyer opened a thin file. "Before we start, I need to clarify one thing. Everything said here will be recorded. We are facing a case involving financial responsibility, bad faith, and emotional damages against Mrs. Martha." The atmosphere changed. Vanessa adjusted herself in the chair, uncomfortable. Jason furrowed his brow. "Emotional damages? Bad faith? Are you kidding?" he said, laughing shortly. Mr. Henderson didn't flinch. "I will present the facts. Afterward, you will have the opportunity to speak." I took a deep breath. I knew my moment would arrive, but there, in that beginning, I just wanted to listen. The lawyer opened the folder and put the first document on the table. "This is the loan made in Mrs. Martha's name. Total value, X, high installments, high interest, nothing consistent with the justification of a quick work opportunity." Jason shifted in his chair. "Mom agreed. She signed. There is nothing irregular." The lawyer kept his voice calm. "She signed based on false information. That constitutes emotional fraud." Vanessa lowered her eyes for a second, fast, almost imperceptible. The lawyer pulled out another document and put it on top of the first. Text messages sent by Vanessa stating that the payment would be made in 2 months. That never happened. We are in the 8th month. Vanessa tried to answer. "Oh, that. I just said that. It wasn't a promise." The lawyer cut her off. "A promise used to convince someone to assume a debt that wasn't theirs has legal validity, especially when it is recorded." Jason looked at her, suspicious. She averted her gaze. Mr. Henderson continued. "The delays started in the 1st month. No installment was paid. Mrs. Martha received 4 official collection notices, and all were ignored by you. Jason narrowed his eyes as if that were news. But it wasn't. He knew. "I was going to pay," he blurted out. "You bought a new car," the lawyer answered, pulling out another paper. "And the car is registered in your name and Vanessa's, bought exactly in the period of the first delay." Vanessa opened her mouth to argue, but closed it again. The lawyer put one more document on the table. "This is the document that proves Mrs. Martha sold the land she inherited from her mother to pay for Jason's tuition. This isn't legal. This is moral. It is the history of sacrifice that makes everything that came after even more grave." Jason lowered his eyes for the first time. Vanessa crossed her arms, impatient, as if all that was a waste of time. Mr. Henderson took a deep breath before continuing. "We have witnesses to the episode in the parking lot. 3 people. All confirm that Jason shouted at his mother, accusing her unjustly and ordering her to disappear from his life. That characterizes emotional violence and moral damages." Jason's face turned red. "Oh no, that is an exaggeration. It was just an argument." The lawyer didn't flinch. "Public argument with humiliating exposure. The law doesn't call that argument. It calls it damages." I felt my chest tremble inside, but I stayed firm as a rock. I didn't crumble. I didn't look away. The lawyer then closed the folder of evidence and said, "Now, before the last part, Mrs. Martha has something to say." It was my moment. I took a deep breath. My hands were cold but steady. I looked first at Jason, then at Vanessa, and I spoke slowly, without raising my voice. "I didn't come here to fight with you, nor to destroy anyone's life. I came because you used me. You used my love, my history, my trust. I endured humiliations inside the house I helped pay for. I endured sideways looks, cutting words. I endured you treating me like a burden." Vanessa turned her face away. Jason stood frozen, looking at me as if he were seeing another woman. "I signed the loan because I trusted, and you knew that. You knew I would never say no. And even so, you lied. You deceived me. You left me to receive the collections alone. And when I asked for an explanation, you humiliated me in public as if I were trash." My body trembled, but my voice didn't. "I raised you alone, Jason. I worked until my body ached. I gave you everything I could, and what I received back was contempt. That was what you chose for me." The silence in the room was absolute, sepulchral. Then I took the last envelope out of the folder. I placed it slowly on the table. "This here is the lawsuit." Vanessa held her breath. Jason's eyes widened. "You are going to have to answer to the law, because justice is the only thing that still keeps me standing. I don't want revenge. I want respect. I want what is mine back, and I want you to never again use my name, my life, or my love for your benefit." Jason tried to speak, but his voice failed. He composed himself. "Mom, are you going to do this to me?" I held back the tears and answered, "I didn't do anything to you. You did it to me. I just stopped accepting it." Mr. Henderson then resumed speaking. "The asset freeze is already active. The lawsuit for financial responsibility will be filed tomorrow. Mrs. Martha has all the evidence necessary to win." Vanessa exploded. "This is absurd. The lady is ruining our life." I looked at her with a calm that surprised even myself. "You ruined mine first." Jason brought his hands to his face. For the first time, he seemed to perceive the size of the disaster. I closed the folder. I stood up. The lawyer stood by my side. Before leaving, I looked just once at Jason. Not with anger, with goodbye. "Now, I am going to live my life. Mine. And you, deal with your choices." And I walked out. The hallway seemed wider. The air felt lighter. Every step I took was like recovering a piece of me that I thought I had lost forever. Justice was done, and I, finally, was free. The days that followed the confrontation seemed like another chapter of my life, a chapter I never imagined living. Nothing happened with explosions, scandals, or soap opera drama. Justice doesn't scream. It walks slowly, but when it arrives, it changes everything's place. Jason was the first to feel it. When he tried to access the joint account to move money, he found the freeze. When he tried to sell the car, he discovered he couldn't. When he called the bank, he heard exactly what Mr. Henderson had already said. The loan was under investigation, and he would need to provide clarifications. His voice on the phone no longer had arrogance. It had panic. When he tried to call me, I didn't answer. Not out of pride, but out of respect for myself. For years, I accepted everything in the name of love. Now, I needed to love myself too. Vanessa was hit in another way. The store where she worked found out about the investigation because of the legal freeze. They didn't fire her, but they suspended her temporarily. Colleagues whispered. Neighbors looked differently. The mask of superiority started to crack. That mocking smile disappeared. She tried to blame Jason, the bank, anything that would take the responsibility off her. But it didn't work. Whoever digs a hole to bury someone, sooner or later falls into it. The most curious thing is that none of this gave me joy. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel the taste of revenge. What I felt was a slow, profound relief, as if someone had taken a backpack full of rocks off my back after years of carrying it. Justice doesn't bring a party. It brings peace. The process went fast, faster than I expected. The court recognized the moral damages, the emotional fraud, and the financial responsibility. Jason would have to pay everything, in installments, supervised, without delays. The public humiliations I suffered were recorded. The evidence spoke for me, and it spoke loudly. When the judge read the final sentence, I didn't cry. I just took a deep breath. It was as if, finally, I had put everything in place inside me. After that, I took the hardest and most liberating decision of my life: to move. I didn't want to live on the same street where I was made less anymore, nor pass by the door of the supermarket where my son ordered me to disappear, nor live near those who looked at me with pity or morbid curiosity. I sold my small house, the one that didn't have much value on paper, but had all the memories of a simple life. Part of the money from the sale I would save, part I would use to start over. I found a small town, not too far, but far enough to breathe different air. A town with paved streets, a bakery on the corner, a square full of trees. I rented a single-story cottage, simple, full of light. When I received the keys, I locked the door from the inside and felt a silence different from everything I had ever heard. It was the silence of peace. I started a new routine. I woke up early, walked in the square, had coffee in the kitchen while the sun came through the window. I went to meet the neighbors, good, quiet people. A lady from my neighborhood invited me to a craft group. I went. I sat at the table with other women my age, talking about simple things, embroidering napkins, laughing at everyday stories. For the first time in a long time, I felt I belonged somewhere. Over time, I started doing small sewing jobs for the neighborhood, light things that didn't demand so much from the body, and I liked it. I liked feeling the fabric, seeing something born from my hands. It gave me peace. It gave me purpose. Mr. Henderson called me from time to time to update the final progress of the process. With every call, a stage concluded. With every stage, a piece of the pain dissolved. He always asked if I was okay, and I was. I was better than I had been in many years. As for Jason, he attempted contact. He sent long messages, full of justifications, saying he didn't do it out of malice, that he was under pressure, that he didn't realize what was happening. I read them all. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't love him. I loved him. A mother doesn't stop loving. But love isn't enough when respect has been destroyed. Love without limits becomes a chain. And I had learned to cut what bound me. One day, he video called me. I almost hung up instantly, but I answered. His face was different. Less haughty, more tired. "Mom, I am paying what I owe. I am fixing everything I need to do. I just wanted to say that I am very sorry." I listened. I stayed silent. I thought, and I answered, "Jason, I wish you the best, but I needed to get out to survive. Forgive me if this hurts you, but I need to be where I am treated with respect." He cried. I didn't cry. I just felt. After that, I kept my distance. I didn't block him, but I established a clear boundary. The boundary is love for myself, something I learned late, but I learned. From time to time, I see my grandkids on video when the situation allows. They smile, ask about my new house, show me their drawings. That warms my soul. Children are not to blame. Children deserve love from both sides, no matter what the adults do. Today, my life is light. Not perfect, not rich, not full of novelties. Light. I walk down the street without fear. I buy bread without rushing. I drink my coffee watching the sun come through the window. Sometimes I sit on the porch and stay there, listening to the wind. And I think about everything I went through, not with pain, but with respect for the woman I was and for the woman I have become. Because I discovered one thing that took time to enter my heart. Nobody, absolutely nobody, has the right to take dignity away from someone. Not a son, not a daughter-in-law, not anyone. One is born with dignity. We lose it sometimes. They forget about us. They pull the rug out from under us. They try to erase who we are. But it takes just one step, a single step, to get up again. If this story reached you, maybe it is because someone nearby also needs to hear this. Respect is the minimum. Love that humiliates is not love. And starting over has no age. It never did. If this story touched your heart, comment here which city you are listening from. And stay with me for the next videos that will appear there on the screen. Someone might need to hear this today.